Your data is like gold to hackers, and they'll sell it to the highest bidder. Are you protected? McAfee helps shield you, blocking suspicious texts, malicious emails, and fraudulent websites. McAfee Secure VPN lets you browse safely, and its AI-powered text scam detector spots threats instantly. You'll also get up to $2 million of award-winning antivirus and identity theft protection, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality bikes, which might lead to another discovery. Getting back in the saddle isn't always comfortable. Good news is Sierra has massage guns. And chafe wipes, too. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. And this one's a match report being recorded the day after the Reds drew 0-0 at home to Arsenal. It's a result that keeps Forest pretty much in third place with a little bit of a cushion still, but also the headlines were going to the fact that the Gunners' title charge is more or less over, with Liverpool 13 points clear at the top of the table. Now, Baz, the key thing, and Nuno mentioned this, was that after the slight chaos at the weekend, I mean, this match couldn't have been much more different, could it? There certainly weren't. If Saturday was a good game for the neutral, then last night was one which, like, the neutrals probably would have been happy to give it a pass.
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, I think there were some similarities, but well, I'm sure we'll get onto them. But yeah, after conceding, 11 goals in 4 games, I think, it was important for us to keep a clean sheet and show that we can shut people out.
Yeah, very much so. And the starting lineup was actually the same that we started against Newcastle. So we had Sells in goal, we had Aina, Murillo, Milenkovic and Williams across the back, with Dominguez keeping his place in midfield alongside Elliot Anderson. And then we had obviously the front four of Alanga, Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs-White behind Chris Wood. Were you surprised to see no changes?
A little bit. I mean, I suppose out of all of them, though, the question mark would be, most of that team selects itself. The question mark is who takes the second midfield slot alongside Anderson. And I thought Dominguez, especially in the first half against Newcastle, had a very, very bad game. So I don't know if that was a confidence boost or there was what Nuno's reasoning behind it was, but that would be the only surprise really in that team.
Yeah, and I'm just going to preface our report by saying that on the whole, I would say that Forest was still deficient in midfield in last night's match until the substitutions were made. And I mean, one of the curios, though, is that although we had the same starting 11, we saw in the Newcastle match at half-time, Nuno swapped over Hudson-Odoi and Alanga so that Hudson-Odoi is playing on the right wing and Alanga on the left. And he did exactly the same, but from the start against Arsenal. Now, against Newcastle, I was speculating it's because Lewis Hall was causing us trouble getting forward from left-back, and by having Hudson-Odoi there, pinned him back a bit more. If that was the plan with Ricardo Calafiore last night, it didn't entirely work, did it?
No, but there's a few things to say about Hudson-Odoi playing that side. One, I think in some ways it's kind of not nullifies, it reduces the potential of both Alanga and Hudson-Odoi, because Hudson-Odoi does his cutting in and then hitting it on his right foot, which he obviously has not done for a while, and Alanga does his cutting in and then ghosting in at sort of the far post on the right-hand side, which neither of them really got the chance to do when playing on the other side. But what I would say is that for big parts of the match, it was almost like we were playing a back five because Callum Hudson-Odoi was playing effectively as a right wing back, deep in our half. And for someone who I've been known to criticise for his lack of tracking back, that showed a lot of commitment from him.
Yeah, oddly enough, actually, because my speculation before the match was that, and for the people who follow us on social media, you'll have seen my team selection, which is I thought maybe he would drop Alanga and play Dominguez in the wide position, thinking back to that match against Aston Villa, where Dominguez basically played as in a similar way, kind of an auxiliary right back to counter the threats coming from Villa's left back position. I thought they might do that. They didn't, but Hudson-Odoi played a similar role to what Dominguez did on that night. The other thing I would say is that, and this is just purely because otherwise I'll forget about it, on a night of few chances, in the second half, Hudson-Odoi did have a moment where he cut inside from the right wing, went onto his left foot and basically blazed it into the River Trent. So it was one of those whereby it doesn't always work out. He's clearly a right-footed player. Now, the other Hudson-Odoi thing, and I mentioned Calafiore, is that after 2 minutes, Calafiore was booked for hauling back Hudson-Odoi on the touchline. And I found myself thinking, if that was my fullback getting booked like that, I'd be absolutely furious because it's such a cheap booking. And yet Forest never quite capitalised on that. I think they could have run at him a little bit more. And there was a moment a little bit later on where you could see Calafiore was thinking about pulling back Hudson-Odoi, remembered he was on a booking. Callum got into the box and then there was a little brush between them, but not enough for a penalty. Should Forest have capitalised on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we probably should have done. But also I think Calafiore is worth talking about just by himself because I can remember seeing him play a couple of years ago and thinking, this looks like a real player. He looks very, very good. And actually as well, I also remember when Nuno first took over, we had a little run of like 3 or 4 games where we suddenly sort of picked up a few results. And what we were doing, and actually one of them was a game against Newcastle, I remember that. And what we were doing was we were playing Nuno Tavares, if you remember him. And instead of as a traditional sort of left wing back, or left fullback, he was playing as an inverted fullback, but not stepping into midfield, stepping all the way up to number 10. And then by him doing that, then that made space for Gibbs White to make things happen. And that's exactly what Calafiore was doing. And we didn't know how to deal with it. Because it wasn't that he was stepping into midfield, which Zinchenko used to do. He was playing right up top. And so that, I think, probably more than anything is why Hudson-Odoi was not worried about running at him because he was more worried about getting run at himself.
Yeah. Just a mention for the other booking that happened. So there were only 2 bookings in this match. The next one came all of a minute later, and it was another incredibly cheap booking where Nikola Milenkovic blocked a free kick from being taken on the edge of the Arsenal box. I really don't think there would have been that much danger of Arsenal breaking and getting a goal scoring opportunity from it, but he chose to do that. I mean, in that respect, I guess as far as the referee's concerned, he probably did his job right because Andy Madley made those 2 early bookings and then there wasn't anything else really that was worthy of it throughout the match. Maybe that says more about the match than it does about the ref. I don't know. Let's go forward as well. You'd mentioned Calafiore, and he had 2 things, I think. So number one, he had by far the most outstanding chance of the game, and it was one of those things where, okay, he's a centre half who's playing left back, who's almost playing as an auxiliary forward. And he had the highest moments of quality by far in the game, which was the closest we saw to a goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing is playing as a left back who's also played at centre back. His feet, he just skipped through our players. Was it Dominguez that he basically left totally for dead, and then got that shot away and. Yeah, he was very unlucky that it didn't go in, and Sells was very lucky that the rebound fell to him as well.
Yeah, I have to say, when it hit the post, I thought it was going to hit the post and go in rather than come back out to the goalkeeper. Um, Obviously, a lot of the media conversation is about how Arsenal don't have enough forwards. If they'd had a number 9, maybe there would have been someone there to tap it in. But there was scarcely a blue shirt in the box, and I think as well. In fact, I'm going to skip to the end here, and I'm going to talk about Mikel Arteta because in his post-match interview, they were talking about how they don't have a forward, but Mikel Arteta, in a moment of honesty, said, "But also we didn't have the final pass." And you know what? Apart from that, and then there was a header from Mikel Merino from a corner, which everyone said was a good reflex save, but also was one that you'd expect Sells to make. And I'm just thinking, actually, the problem with Arsenal is they didn't threaten. It wasn't that they didn't have a number 9; is they didn't know how to threaten. Their final, Ødegaard was off form. Trossard and Nwaneri looked like two players who probably played too much football. And then Marino, partly because Calafiore was going forward, was dropping into his more natural midfield position, and it meant that actually, for the most part, our centre backs were pretty comfortable.
I think as an outsider watching Arsenal, I would say who they really miss is Saka, because if you think back to the game where we played them, they won 3-0, didn't they? Mm-hmm. And it was the combination of Ødegaard and Saka together there. Ødegaard knew exactly where Saka was going to be, and Saka's movement left us completely bamboozled. And that's what they really missed more than anything else. They had no cutting edge because Ødegaard had no one to pass to. Yeah,
there's something to be said for that. And I mean, also Saka is yet another of the long list of players who always scores against Forest. So in that respect, that might have saved us as well. Let's move on to talk about a few of the other moments as well. So Forest basically didn't have a chance in the first half. I felt that we were pretty pedestrian in a lot of positions. And you mentioned, obviously, that Hudson-Odoi was coming back as an auxiliary right back. Ola Aina, once again, I thought had a match where he looked, frankly, a bit leggy and slightly behind the pace.
Yeah, I think after spending weeks praising him as the best fullback in the division, I think he had a poor game. There was quite a few times where he did the decent defensive thing, and then it's like the ball got stuck under his feet and he just gave it back to the Arsenal player.
Yeah.
And that happened like 3 or 4 times I can remember in the first half. There is one thing that I just want to mention, though. We mentioned about Hudson-Odoi getting pulled back into basically a defensive position. There was a point, maybe about quarter of an hour, 20 minutes in, where Elanga cut in from the left and just charged at Raya, and Raya looked like he didn't know what to do. He just had to hoof the ball clear. He didn't know what to do. And I thought, actually, for a team that likes to play out from the back and makes a point of their own press, in that moment, they looked really, really vulnerable to it. And we'll come back to it, but there was points in the second half where they looked vulnerable to it again.
Yeah. I would point out that was probably Elanga's most notable contribution of the game. He had another one of his anonymous games. He's a bit all or nothing, and he's either really good or really anonymous, I guess. And at halftime, it was 0-0.
The 1865 match report.
It's winter, and you can now get almost anything you need for the coldest months of the year delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a ski slope delivered, but you can get dish soap delivered. Sunshine, that's a no. But a bottle of wine, that's a yes. A snow angel, sorry, no. But angel hair pasta, Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol and select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to the 1865 match reports, the day after Forest drew 0-0 with Arsenal. Now, Baz, we said about the first half was fairly pedestrian, but Arsenal had the better of it. Let's just get it out of the way. Arsenal are a better team than us. They've got a better squad than us. They're missing players at the moment. But the fact they were in control of it, they still didn't really threaten. And then in the second half, Forest did have a couple of moments, as you alluded to just before the break, where they caused Arsenal a few issues.
Yeah, I mean, just again to drop into Arsenal. I mean, the first 20 minutes of the second half was just a string, like one after the other, of Arsenal corners, and I think that probably is the most pleasing thing from our point of view, because everyone's been waxing lyrical about Arsenal's set pieces. They were very, very entertaining to watch because they would line up four players away from the big scrum in the box. Those four players would run in, and because they would all run in a line, and because they were running in a line, then our defenders wouldn't know where they were going to finish up. So that was their idea of like trying to break past our marking, but it didn't work. They must have had like 10, 15 corners in that, like in the second half. And yeah, it just didn't work. It was that showed our defensive resolve. And then, I mean, we did look like we were being swamped for that first 20, 25 minutes, but Nuno made the change, and that was pretty much the turning point of the game. And I would say, I mean, I'm sure Arsenal fans would disagree, but actually, because of that, if anyone was going to win it, I'd have said it would have been us because of the change Nuno made.
Yeah. So just against Newcastle, when changing up in midfield was the pivotal thing in terms of getting Forest into the game. It was again, the changes to Alanga come off and Dominguez come off, and Yates and Danilo came on. And Danilo played, is almost a change of formation, really, wasn't it? So we saw Anderson go to the left wing, which we kind of wasn't a big surprise. But Danilo almost played as a 6 in a sort of a 4-1-4-1, with Yates almost playing alongside Gibbs-White at times. And that was symptomatic of the extra energy and press that we had as we took the game to Arsenal a little bit more, I thought. And of course, Forest did actually create chances after that. And although, the most notable chance was the one that Chris Wood had when he and Gibbs-White made runs down the inside channel on the right-hand side going into the Arsenal box. And the only thing I would say is that I think in a rare moment, Chris Wood snatched at it slightly. I thought he had time to take it one step inside and then have a better angle for the shot. But as it was, he took the shot. Raya saved it at his near post. Do you think that he had a bit more time than that?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a symmetry with this and the next Chris Wood chance. But the move to make it was absolutely brilliant, because it was Wood that played it to Gibbs-White. He turned his man and then played it back to Wood. And then, Wood basically took it first time. It was a very, very tight angle. And Raya had it well covered. And, he could have... He didn't have anyone on him. Raya was a little way away, so he probably had the time to take a quick touch, steady himself, and maybe place it a bit better. And then pretty much straight after... within a couple of minutes after, it was, I think it was Hudson-Odoi played it to Gibbs-White, who was on the right-hand side. And he played one of those balls that it could either look speculative or genius. And it was probably a bit of both. But
I'm going to disagree with you there. I think that it was basically the same ball that Anthony Elanga played to Callum Hudson-Odoi at Anfield. It's just that I think it was Saliba just got enough of a touch on it to stop it going straight to Chris Wood.
Yeah. But Wood recovered the ball anyway. And this time, instead of hitting it first time, he took a touch. And that's what gave Saliba the time to go in and slide in and make the tackle, which took it off his feet.
And it's an excellent Murillo-like tackle. But my thought actually was, if that had been Elanga rather than Wood, then, there's no contest, like Saliba wouldn't have got there. Whether they'd have had the finish or not, I don't know. It's another matter entirely. But this also brings us, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit, because you and I were on the chat, weren't we, saying we could have given Taiwo more minutes. Taiwo came on 85 minutes. And I was just thinking, nothing against Woody, but this is exactly the kind of match where Taiwo would give their defence a problem. And I think actually even in the short space of time he looked threatening enough, presenting that kind of more physical presence that, we always joke about it, don't we? His ability to bumble through players with that little bit more pace and a little bit more a bit more sturdy, I guess. And yeah, it would have been nice to see him get a few more minutes, wouldn't it?
I think if you look back at Taiwo's record against Arsenal in the last, 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, they must be terrified of him, because every time he's played against them, he's just bullied their defence out of the way. And that's what he was doing for the last, 5-6 minutes that he was on. He made such a difference. And this again comes back to the Newcastle game. So in the second half against Newcastle, we played high up the pitch, lots of possession, lots of high pressing to win the ball back when Newcastle had it. And especially as soon as Danilo and Yates came on, that moved our midfield further up the pitch, like an extra 15 yards up the pitch. And so we started pressing them. But as soon as Taiwo came on, it was like they couldn't keep hold of the ball because he was just barging through them. And so they had no time to play the ball out. And then so it would come back to Danilo or Yates or Gibbs-White. And it just kept the ball sort of in 25 yards away from their goal at most.
Yeah. And of course, unfortunately, I mean, let's just say I think 0-0 was probably fair in the end. And what I would do is just make reference to Nuno's comments. And he said a couple of interesting things. And the most interesting thing that I thought he said was that basically we needed to find ourselves again. And of course, having had that run of conceding goals, having had that defeat at Newcastle, which, yeah, although we kind of gave them a bit of a run for their money right at, in that second half, we were also poor. So Nuno said it's a good point because it was a tough game. Today was about finding ourselves. Our main strength is our bond. The players try and help each other. And then he also commented on the fans. So this was very much a match about having a bit of a reset, I think, from Nuno's perspective. The other thing I would add in there is, and this is the conversation obviously is on everyone's lips as a Forest fan, surely Yates has got to start.
Yeah, I mean, he gave us a lot of energy. He does that thing where he wins us breathing space by buying a foul, and he must annoy the hell out of the opposition players. He certainly annoys the hell out of the opposition fans. I mean, I can see why, especially with Danilo and Sangare back, that Nuno might try his options and see what's what. But there's definitely a place for him. I've said this before. In the olden days, there were players like Robbie Savage, who I absolutely detested. But if I was a manager, he'd be the first name on the team sheet because everyone else detests him.
Yeah, there's something to be said for, but crucially as well. I mean, it's easy to focus upon, I suppose, the negative elements. The kind of the black hole element of the way Yates plays and that he sucks opponents and the opposition fans into him. But also, crucially, I really think that the Newcastle match and last night's match also showed the level of leadership that we lack when he's not on the pitch, because that kind of organization, that energy, that kind of idea about who's doing what, how we're carrying out the plan. I think because Gibbs-White plays that little bit more further forward, maybe that's missing a little bit when there's no Yates in midfield.
Actually, no, it's interesting you should say that. So, I mean, I was thinking in terms of there's only him and Nico as well who will go to the crowd and G them up. But I've only just thought of this, but one of the things earlier in the season was Milenkovic was very, very vocal, and I've not noticed him being that as much. So maybe he's suffering a little bit of a confidence hit because having conceded so many goals or something. But I mean, that was certainly something in terms of organisation. Milenkovic was providing that, and he doesn't seem to be doing that quite as much now.
Okay, so, I mean, the next match is obviously on Monday in the Cup. Do you see there being 10, 11 changes again?
I don't think so. I think this little run of games has basically said we can't like they always say, like, winning's a habit. Well, losing's also a habit, and we can't afford to allow for any slip-ups now.
Mm-hmm. And also, do you think there's anything to be said for the fact that when he made the changes, he took off Elanga and brought in a central midfielder, put Anderson into the position on the left, which we know when we signed him that he has played left midfield before. But as well, do you think that's also about shoring up the midfield, or is it a comment on the Jota Silvas and Ramon Sosas of this world?
It's a bit of both, I think. Because Anderson is a very, very talented player, but he's not going to be as spectacular as Jota Silva. But then he's also not going to give as much away as Jota Silva. And Ramon Sosa, I really like him. I think he's a very, very tidy player, but I don't think he's got 90 minutes in him at Premier League level yet.
He's quite old-fashioned in a kind of a Gary Crosby, Kingsley Black kind of way, isn't he?
Yeah, he just...
Yeah. So I would also, last question, I guess, is, we heard the stat a couple of weeks ago about how Forest have got more players who've played more minutes than any other team in the Premier League. But when I think 4 of our back 5, so Sells, Aina, Milenkovic and Murillo, have played a lot of minutes, do you think we're paying the price a little bit? Do you think the players are looking a bit leggy and also maybe a bit mentally tired?
I think... certainly, Aina looks physically tired. I think that the fact that, as I said, he would make the tackle and then basically give the ball away. It was like his legs weren't doing what he wanted them to do. Whereas maybe what I was just saying about Milenkovic, that's a more mental tiredness sort of thing. He hasn't got he's putting all his effort into keeping himself going rather than looking around to keep everyone else going. Mm. But, I mean, what can you do? That's part of the reason we're so solid is because they know each other and they've worked together so much. One thing I will say about Murillo as well is that game against Arsenal, he was stepping into midfield a lot more than he has been recently. So I don't know if that was a deliberate tactical thing or if he just thought, right, there's the space there, I'm going to go for it. And we know he likes to carry the ball out, but he was playing pretty much on the halfway line for big parts of the game. And again, I suppose actually Nuno did say afterwards, we knew they don't have a striker, so maybe he'd just be told, let's take advantage of that.
Yeah, very much so. And so obviously Ipswich in the cup, and I think that we know that, let's be honest, Aina and Milenkovic and Murillo are probably going to get rest. We'll probably see Sosa and Jota playing as well. But I think the middle of the park is going to be the interesting part as well. So we will be obviously reporting back after that match. We have got a long weekend because of the way the fixtures have fallen. So just do keep an ear out, because we're not doing a Friday 5 News Roundup this weekend, but we are releasing a show that was recorded after Billy Davies's event, It Is What It Is, where Tom and Stephen and Maradon the Midlands were in attendance. So we'll have a show reviewing that event. And also keep an eye out on our podcast feed, because we will be bringing you part 2 of our 1994-95 30 years on season review. In the meantime, I want to say thank you very much to you, Baz. Thank you, listener, for joining us. We'll be back very, very soon. Come on, you Reds.
Is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge. From worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.